Okay, hello friends, and welcome to a Chabura public shiur, Chodesh Tov for many of us. Tonight we will be exploring what constitutes a day in Halakha and the status of twilight. Leading us today is Rabbi Yitzhak Berdugo. Rabbi Berdugo is a true Talmid Chachamim, and it is always a privilege to have him with us at the Chabura. About our speaker, Rabbi Berdugo is the founder of the Institute of Sephardic Halakha. He received his semicha from Rav Eliyahu ben Chaim, Av Bet Din of Mikor Chaim. He also studied in the Kollel of Florida under Av Bet Din of Miami, Rabbi David Shon. He is currently studying towards a Dayanut qualification through the Eretz Chamda Institute and Montefiore Endowment. As mentioned, Rabbi Berdugo has been with us many times before, and I highly recommend giving those previous shiurim a listen. Those classes can be found on the Chabura's website through the members portal. With that said, thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and thank you so much, Rabbi Berdugo. The floor is yours.
Alrighty, shalom aleichem to everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to be back with you guys again. It's such a beautiful thing we have here to have the Chabura and to have a platform where we could share these type of ideas with each other. This is a topic that a lot of people talk about, but not a lot of people talk about the way we're going to talk about it. And we're going to do it Chabura style, or at least my style in the Chabura, with definitely a lot of Mare Mekomot and not so much filtering. We're going to say it as is. So it's a large topic. It's more on the advanced side, especially in the beginning, because we're going to really understand it properly, we're going to have to go through the Gemarot. There's a famous contradiction between one Gemara to another Gemara. See the approach of the Tosafot, how they came up with a certain idea based off the contradictions. We're going to see how the Geonim learned it differently. And we're going to see what is the practice and how should we practice nowadays. So without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Let me know if you guys can get it. Sorry, this got one. And share. Can you see? Can you confirm? Yeah, it's perfect. Okay. Alrighty. So let's begin. Oh, why is it just one screen? 1 second. There we go. Okay, better like that. So the first Gemara is in Shabbat, Daf Lamed Daled Amud Bet, and it starts off with Tanu Rabbanan. Ben Hashemashot, Safek min hayom umin halayla. So what's Ben Hashemashot? We're going to say, for just the sake of easiness, we're going to say Ben Hashemashot is twilight. When the sun goes down, the simple interpretation is when the sun goes down past the horizon, the entire sun, seemingly, this is how the simple explanation, that's called Ben Hashemashot. So we're going to call this twilight. So it's, however, that says, Safek min hayom umin halayla. Perhaps we're in doubt, does it compose of both day and night elements? Or Safek kulo min hayom, or perhaps it's a Safek if it's the entire thing is day, or Safek kulo min halayla, or perhaps the entire thing is a nighttime. So we have three different Sfekot regarding this time of Ben Hashemashot. So I already gave you the introduction, but the Gemara asks, Ve'ezeh Ben Hashemashot? What is Ben Hashemashot? Right? We're going to have to get used to this word, Ben Hashemashot, for anybody who doesn't know. So Rabbi Yehuda, I actually just cut and paste different parts of the Gemara, sometimes a little bit out of order, but just to make it easy for the class right now. So very important shita to remember, Rabbi Yehuda. Right? Rabbi Yehuda was a Tana, and he says, Mishitishka Hama. Once the sun sets past the horizon, we're going to go with a simple explanation right now. Kol zeman shepenei mizrach ma'adimin. When the entire penei mizrach, seemingly that means the eastern side of the world, when it's still red. But however, the Gemara later on, I brought in the footnote below, that the Gemara in Lamed Hayes explains that what does it mean, Penei Mizrach? It means the Penei Ma'arav, the west, that brings light to the east. So whenever the west still has red in it, that's considered to be Ben Hashemashot. But then the Gemara says, continues Rabbi Yehuda, Hichsif ha'tachton velo hichsif ha'elyon. Let's say the bottom part of the sky, right? Let's say it's a dome. You have the bottom part of the sky, the upper part of the sky. So the bottom part of the sky got dark. But the top part is still red. Ben Hashemashot, that's still considered Ben Hashemashot. Until Hichsif Ha'elyon Vishva Letachton. But once the upper part of the sky also became equally dark to the bottom, ze laila, that's when it's night. So the Gemara, I skipped it out here, but the Gemara asks, it's kind of confusing because you said once it's Penei Mizrach Ma'adimim, when it's red in the west, that's already Ben Hashamashot. But then it said, no, only if it's Hichsif Tachton, Hichsif Elyon. So it sounds like, no, it's not, red is not enough to be Ben Hashamashot. It has to be only when it's dark on the bottom, red on top. So therefore, two different Amoraim, they try to interpret the words of Rabbi Yehuda, who was the Tana, like we mentioned. So the first one is Rabbi. Rabbi, he says, it's actually Amoraim, in the name, it's Amoraim, Rabbi, in the name of Shemuel, and also Rav Yosef in the name of Shemuel as well. So they're both saying it from Shemuel. Two different teachings, the link of the tradition somehow broke, and therefore there's two explanations of what Shemuel said. They're both saying it in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi says one way and Rav Yosef says another way. So Rabbi, he says, Keroch utni, you have to actually combine the whole teaching of Rabbi Yehuda and teach it this way. Ezehu ben Hashemashot, what is considered to be this ben Hashemashot, twilight? Meshetishka hama kol zman shepeni mizrach ma'adimin. So once the sun goes past the horizon and the entire east is, which really means the west, is red, that's ben Hashemashot. And let's say just the bottom is dark, but the top part of the west is still red. Nami ben Hashemashot, that's still considered to be ben Hashemashot, until only until it completely, the western side gets completely dark, that's going to be Laila. That's when it's considered nighttime. So the Gemara actually explains what is this exactly, what's the measurement, how do we measure this? So it says Shelosha Helkei Mil, and then it explains that's Tilata Rivi'ei Milah, which means 3/4 of a mil. This time frame of when the sun goes down all the way to the nighttime, the time frame of that, the time span is 3/4 of a mil. So what is a mil? Mil is this, it was a Roman type of measuring for distance. And simply the Geonim, the Rishonim, they explain it's the distance it takes to walk 2,000 amot, right? And amma is 6 tfachim, so let's say whatever it is, 6 tfachim, 1 amma, 2,000 of that is a mil. And how long does it take to walk 2,000 amot? So there's actually different shittot regarding that. We have the famous one of the Terumat Adeshin. It's important to remember this. It's going to be 18 minutes. It takes to walk 1 mil is 18 minutes. So therefore 3/4 of a mil, which the Gemara said, according to Rabba, that's going to be 13.5 minutes. So it's very famous. Always people talk about, let's say, you prayed mincha, or it's Pashakia and you have to do mincha. Chamobadi Yosef says, you have 13.5 minutes. Because that's 3/4 of a mil, according to the Terumat Adeshin, that holds 18 minutes is the time it takes to walk a mil. We're going to see the Rambam. He actually was posek, he writes in Perush Mishnayot in multiple places, that the time it takes to walk a mil is actually 24 minutes. So it's longer. So therefore 3/4 of 24, what would be 3/4 of a mil? According to the Rambam, it's 18 minutes. So you have more time. We're going to see Maran Shulchan Aruch. Ramazuz brings down a few places. He says he didn't see what the Rambam held. He only saw the Terumat Adeshin regarding that it was 18 minutes and not 24 minutes. So whatever it is, he says it's Shlosha Helkei Mil, Tilta Revi'im Milah, 3/4 of a mil. That time of Ben Hashemashot is 3/4 of a mil. We're going to go with the Rambam shot, which is 3/4 of 24 minutes, which is 18 minutes for a mil. Then you have Rav Yosef. Just to go a little faster because there's a lot of information. He holds it's Terei Tilte Mil. It's 2/3 of a mil. And the math would be, according to Rabba, it's 9/12 of a mil. And according to Rav Yosef, it's a little shorter. It's 8/12 of a mil, right? So therefore, just added in here that the difference between Rav Yosef and Rabba would be 1/12 of a mil. So according to the Rambam, there's a 2-minute difference according to between Rabba and Rav Yosef. So now that's the shita. They were again Rabba and Rav Yosef were trying to explain Rabbi Yehuda. So then you have Rabbi Nehemiah. He comes and says a different shita. He says, no, he says the time from Shekiah of Ben Hashemashot is going to be half of a mil, right? So it will be 12 minutes. Then you have Rabbi Yosei. another very important shita. He says, Ben Hashemashot keheref ayin. The Ben Hashemashot, this time of twilight, which we call twilight, but now we have to go back to the Hebrew term because there's not an English translation for it. But Ben Hashemashot it's like a blink of an eye. It comes out of nowhere. It comes in and goes out, and it's impossible to actually, give a time for it because it's so fast. So therefore, the Gemara actually later on, I copied and pasted here in a different place, it says that the time of Ben Hashemashot of Rabbi Yossi comes right after Rabbi Yehuda. So let's say Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi, again, this is technical, but it's 3/4 of a mil, which is 18 minutes. Right after 18 minutes, boom, comes in the time of Rabbi Yossi. And that's when Ben Hashemashot counts. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi, you have much more time to of daytime until Ben Hashemashot comes. You have 18 minutes, and then comes in the time of Rabbi Yossi. Fine. So now the Gemara adds in, what's the halakha? Halakha lema'aseh, who do we go like? We have all these different shitot. We have, again, Rabbi Yehuda. We have Rabbi Nehemiah, Rabbi Yossi. Who do we go like? So the Gemara says, Amar Rabba bar Hana, Amar Rabbi Hanan, halakha ki Rabbi Yehuda li'inyan Shabbat. So we're going to be machmir. For Shabbat, we're going to be machmir. And the poskim, we're going to go with Rabba, which is 3/4 of a mil. So Shabbat, we're not going to do, once, let's say, 3/4 of a mil from Shkia, from sunset downwards comes in, that time, we're not going to do any melacha. And also for Shabbat, when it's leaving, we're going to be machmir. We're going to make sure that we wait after sunset, 18 minutes, according to Rambam, until we can do melacha. So Shabbat, we're going to be machmir. And however, for Tirumah, we're going to be machmir, but we're going to be machmir like Rabbi Yossi, because the Kohanim, they were not able to eat the Tirumah until Ben Hashemashot finished. They have to eat it at nighttime only. So therefore, we're going to be machmir and wait longer, right? Because if you were going to be more mekel, it would be faster. So we're going to take the chumrot of both shitot. Fine. The next page of the Gemara. Now we have Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shemuel, another teaching from the same Rav Shemuel. Right before we had Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shemuel, two rabbis, Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef, explaining what Rabbi Yehuda held. So now he comes in on his own, Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shemuel by himself, and he says something very important that we're going to see the Rishonim are posek. Kochav echad, one star is daytime. Shenaim, 2 stars, ben hashemashot. Shelosha laila. So even when, according to this so far, even when it's, let's say the sun went down and there's only 1 star, it's still considered to be day. When you have 2, that's when it's safek. You have 1 star from the day, 1 star from the night. It's ben hashemashot. 3 stars, Rav Kafa, he actually explains that you have now 2 outdoing the 1 star of the day, 2 of the night outdoing the 1 star of the day. So therefore it's laila. So in Amar Rabbi Yosef, so what type of stars are we referring to? So lo kochavim gedolim anirim bayom. We're not talking about stars, big stars that only can be seen during the daytime, right? Sometimes you can look out the window, you see the moon, and you can sometimes see stars, very big stars. Velo kochavim kitanim she'en nirin ela belayla. And we're not talking about stars that are so small that you only see at nighttime. This is very important. Ela benonim. Rather, we're talking about average stars, which means these are stars that you could actually see once the sun set. There's these type of stars that come out. They have to be average stars. Fine. And now a very important teaching that, again, I copied and pasted from the Gemara. It says like this. Amar le Rava le So Rava, he told his servant, and then according to the Girsa Rabbeinu Hananel, he told Lebnei Mehuza, he told the people, the citizens of Mehuza. He says, Atun de lo kimlechu b'shiura derabbanan. You guys that you're not so well versed and you're not educated in the measurements or the timings of the rabbis. Adishimsha aresh dikle atlu sheraga. When you see the sun go on top of the palm trees, on the top part of the palm trees, go and light your candles for Shabbat, or light your lights for Shabbat. That's the last time you can do melacha. You don't really know when the sun or when Ben Hashemashot starts. So therefore, we'll make it easy for you. Look at the palm trees, see the sun on the west. It's right above the palm trees. Do all your melacha you need to do, and halas, that's it. So then the Gemara asks, Bemata, Beyom Hame'unan Mai, what happens if it's a cloudy day? What do you do? So it says, Bemata, if you're in a city, Hazetar Nigola. So look at the chickens. The chickens, they used to go and sit on these type of on these beams, and they would do it. They would sit dafka. They would go up onto these beams, during Ben Hashemashot. So at that moment, or right before Ben Hashemashot, before the evening came. So that's a time, that's a siman that you can actually know to when's the last time you could do melacha. And bidabra, and if you're in the desert, then orve, then take the ravens. The ravens do a similar type of thing. Inami, alternatively, adane. Adane, Rashi explains, I put them in the brackets, is that these are type of plants or trees or grass that it actually it would move during the direction of the sun. So when the sun's about to set, the leaves start going towards the west, and therefore then that it's going to be sunset, and therefore you can no longer do any melacha. So that is the first Gemara in Shabbat. Remember this? Shabbat, the first Gemara in Shabbat that talks about Ben Hashemashot, actually explains Ben Hashemashot, how long it is. Simply put it, sounds like the way Harambam is posek. Simply, everything I say is simply because we're going to say how there's so much people on this concept, but the simple pshat of Harambam is that we're going like Rabbi, where it's 3/4 of a meal, and at the same time we're going with Rabbi Huda Amar Shemuel, that it has to be 3 stars that are Benoni, regular stars that you can see. They're not big stars, not small stars, just the right small stars that you can see. And that's when you have, that's Ben Hashemashot. And at that moment, we're going to be Machmir on Shabbat. However, background information, before we get to the next Gemara in Psachim, it's important to actually know how actually the cosmology of the Hachamim in the old days. How did they used to look at the sun, the movement of the sun, the movement of the moon, the Galgalim, etc. So, and this is important because we're going to see really how Rabbeinu Tam based his theory off of the cosmology of that time. So, a Gemara, before we get into the Ben Hashemashot of the Gemara, it's important for everybody to know this. The Gemara there in Sadi Dalid, it says, Hachmei Yisrael Omrim, the Jewish scholars would say, Bayom Hama me'aleche lemata min harakiya. So during the day, if you can follow along with my mouse, so during the daytime, the sun would go underneath the rakia, right? The rakia is the firmament. The firmament was this type of, I don't know how to even explain it in modern science and cosmology because we don't really have it, but it's let's say in a simple pshat, let's say we read Bereshit, it's to keep the Mayim Elyonim up in there, and there's it's the stars and everything are kavua inside of that. They're in that. So according to the way the Hachamim used to look at the world, is that the sun goes underneath the firmament. So right over here, follow my mouse, we can see all the different stars in this picture. So we go underneath the rakia. Ubelayla, but at nighttime, lemala min harakiya. So if you follow my mouse, if you can see it, it goes above the firmament. So you just follow the orange dotted lines from left to right. It goes first above the below the firmament around the world. And then it goes into the firmament at nighttime and then goes back around. It doesn't go underneath the earth. And then it goes all the way back to the beginning of sunset and makes its way through the rakia and repeats over and over again. So it does not go underneath the globe or the earth, or let's say maybe the flat earth. It doesn't go underneath. Rather, it just goes above. It goes below the rakia, below the firmament, and then above the firmament, but never below the earth. So that's the way the Hachamim, the Jewish Hachamim, used to believe. The Hachmei Umot Ha'olam Omrim, however, the non-Jewish scholars, probably referring to the Greek scholars, Bayom Hama me'aleche lemata min harakiya, they say no. During the daytime, it goes underneath the rakia, so they agree that there's this rakia. Ubalayla lemata min hakarka. However, at nighttime, it doesn't go over the firmament again. Rather, it goes below the earth. And this is what we know nowadays, that the sun goes below the earth. And Amar Rabbi, if anybody has questions on this, no problem. So Amar Rabbi comes and says, Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, he says, V'nir'in divrehen midivarenu. He says, it seems that their words are more correct than our words, that the sun goes underneath the earth. Shebeyom ma'ayanot sonenin. The proof for that is because during the daytime, we see that the springs are cold, ubalayla, and at nighttime, the rothin, they're hot. What Rabbi is saying is that since the sun goes underneath the earth at nighttime, that causes the earth to heat up, and therefore the wells and the springs, they get hot. That's actually the halakha, why we have to have mayim shelanu on Pesach. When you're making your matzah, the water has to be rested. You have to take it out from the ground, leave it overnight in a cup or in your refrigerator, or whatever you want to do, and then use that water, because we don't want the water to be hot from the sun from underneath the earth. Whatever, we're going to see there soon. There's a book coming out about Rabbeinu Avam ben Rambam that he explains that even this science of Rabbi, how he thought that the Chachamim, the Chachmei Goyim were correct, was based off of incorrect science, because we know nowadays we have a core in the middle of the earth, and that's where the heat comes from, and it's not getting heated up from the sun going below the earth. But whatever, that's the Gemara. This is the Gemara. Just so you know, it's very interesting. If you can open up any Sidur, I have, let's say, my Koren Sidur, right? Here I brought the Nusach as well. It says, we stay on Shabbat, in Shacharit, before, on the Berachot of Kirat Shema, we say, Hakol Yoducha, ve'akol Yishabechucha, ve'akol Yomru en Kadosh Kadonai, hakol Yomucha Sela, Yotzer hakol, ha'el ha'poteach bechol yom, datot sharei mizrach, right? We say that God who opens up the doors of the east, ubokeach halon rakia, right? He pierces he makes a hole in the rakia, the firmament. Motzi hama mimekoma, he takes the sun from its spot, which is from outside the firmament, and brings it back. He takes it from there, and he also puts the moon. Also, I didn't explain it, but the moon also goes through the same process as well, just alternating with the sun. So in the Sidur that we pray with every day, or on Shabbat, we actually have this in our Nusach, and it's part of the song that we say before or during the Berachot of Shema. So that seemingly is problematic, because how do we deal with the Gemara? The Gemara sounds like that Rabbi Yehuda Anasi himself, he said that the words of the Chachami, of the Chachmei Goyim, are more correct than our words, right? So we're going to see how the different Rishonim approach this. Fine. So now, with that understanding of how the cosmology of the ancient world and how they understood it, we're going to see the Gemara in Pesachim. Rabbi Yehuda comes in Rabbi Yehuda. The same, remember, Rabbi Yehuda that we learned before, he was the one that said 3/4 of a meal is ben hashemashot. That's the distance of ben hashemashot. He says, Uviyosher rikiya echad mi'asara bayom. He says the thickness of the rikiya, right? So we have here the firmament. How thick is the firmament that the sun has to travel? So he says it's 1/10 of the distance of the day, of pretty much the distance in between one rikiya to the other rikiya, other side of the rikiya, right? And therefore, I'm going to have to, we're running, there's a lot of information. So in the end, he says it's arbaat milin. He says that it's 1/10 of the entire distance of the day would be 4 milin. So therefore, which is 1 parsa. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, here in the Gemara Pesachim, sounds like the distance of ben hashemashot, or he doesn't say ben hashemashot, but ma'alot hashachar hanetzach hama, or mishkiyat, I put it in purple here, mishkiyat hama ve'atzeta kochavim, shkiyat tetzeta kochavim, arbaat milin. He writes explicitly 4 milin, right? We just said before it's 3/4 of 1 mil. He's saying it's 4 mil. So it's contradiction seemingly, right? And then on top of that, you have Rabbi Bar Hana, Rabbi Yohanan. Rabbi Yohanan says, no, it's 5 milin. He does the calculations differently. So he says from the time when the sun goes down past the horizon, all the way till it goes through the thickness of the firmament, it takes 5 milin, which is a much greater distance. So Tosafot, all the way in Shabbat, going back to the first Gemara we learned, he deals with this question, right? Famously, the school of thought of Tosafot is, of course, they're coming to bring different stirot between one Gemara and another Gemara, and then providing a solution for that contradiction. So according to their school of thought, he says, Kasha, mashma mishkiya, de mishkiyat hamad halayla leka elatil tarvi mil. In our Gemara in Shabbat, the first thing we learn is mashma, you have 3/4 of a meal for shkiya till sete kochavim. Rabbi Yehuda gufa b'sachim, but now the Gemara we just read in Pesachim about the Rakiya, etc. It says arbaat milin, 4 milin. So therefore, skip to the bold. The Omer Rabbeinu Tam. This is the famous shita of Rabbeinu Tam. The Hatam there in Pesachim, Mayri b'techilat shikiya. In Pesachim, when it said 4 mil, that's talking about the beginning of the shikiya, which means right when the sun goes down from the horizon, before it enters into the rakiya, or while it's entering into the rakiya, that's where you start the counting for 4 milin. However, ve'acha in Shabbat, the first thing we learn, mishetishka misof shekia, right? That's where the lashon mishetishka is talking about misof shekia, the end of shekia, which means acha shenichnesa hama be'ovea harakia. Once the sun already went into the depth of the firmament, then you count 3/4 of a meal left. Right. So before we read more of this, I'm just going to go down a little bit. I was going to draw something out, but then Baruch Hashem, I Googled it, and there's already a beautiful drawing put out there. I forgot the website, I didn't put it. But here they explain Shitat Rabbeinu Tam very simply. You have, let's go to this picture here. So you have, here's the Rakia, right? The Rakia goes around the world. And according to the Hachamim, the Jewish Hachamim, the sun would go through the Rakia, the firmament, and then go all the way up, starting from the east again, going through that. So that we're dealing with the Ma'arav here. So here you have the Shemesh going into the Rakia. That's the Shekia right here. And then you have, it's in the Rakia itself. And then towards the end, you have, if you see the dotted line right here, that dotted line, that's the Ben HaShamashot. That's the 3/4 meal you have left until it gets to the big, thick dotted line, the thick black line. That's the end of Shekia, which would create, if you look at the next picture, Tzeta Kochavim. So from the Yom, from the day, once it goes into the Rakia, all the way till it goes out the Rakia, the other side of the Rakia, to go behind the Rakia, you have Arbat Milin. However, you have 3/4 of a meal at the end of the journey of the sun through the Rakia, through the firmament, which is 3/4 of a meal, right? So therefore, Tosafot is basing his answer according to the understanding of the Hachamim, the Jewish Hachamim, which we're going to see is a problem, like we just learned before, because seemingly the Jewish Hachamim admitted that they were incorrect and that there's no business of the Rakia, of the Shemesh going through the Rakia. But nevertheless, he's saying that Rabbi Yehuda, he was counting in the Gemara in Shabbat, the Sof Shekia, which is the 3/4 of a meal. That's when Ben HaShamashot comes in. And therefore, that's when we're going to be Safek Yom, Safek Laila. But everything else before that dotted line is still considered to be day. That's the most shocking thing about Rabbeinu Tam, is that once the sun goes past the Ofek is the horizon in Hebrew. Once it goes past that, it's still day. You still have plenty of time, right? You have pretty much 3 meal and a fourth of time before it actually is even Safek Yom, before it's Ben HaShamashot. And then you have Ben HaShamashot, which is only 3/4 of a meal left, right? So that is the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam. And just he has a Sefer HaYashar of Rabbeinu Tam. That is the Sefer where he actually explains it more, and he brings more proofs behind it, and he brings his ideology behind it. And simply, we don't have to really go to it because we don't have enough time, but the Ramban as well, he kind of brings it nicely. I'll just read the Ramban. He summarizes it nicely. He says, Shehu Zal, Rabbeinu Tam holds, Omer shemishitishka hama di'it maracha, Shehu ben HaShemashot, Hainu misof shikiyat hama. The Gemara in Shabbat, that's talking about the end shkia, like we mentioned. Klomar, mishah shenishka berikia v'hi adayin keneged halono, right? Which means where the sun already went shenishka, it's already absorbed in the middle of the firmament, and it's still parallel to the opening, the window, right? We saw in the Tefillah, the Sidur, that there's actually a window that opens up for the sun to come out and in from. So it's still parallel to that window, that opening. And since it didn't pass the window yet, and it didn't go to the back of the Rakia yet, therefore that's why you get some redness going on in the west, because of the sun going through that window of opening in the firmament. And that's what the Gemara, our Gemara in Shabbat, the first Gemara we learned, when it says that it's still red in the west, that's because the sun's coming through, the redness is coming through the window of the firmament. However, the beginning Shikia, which is what we call twilight nowadays, when the sun passes the horizon, that's still daytime, according to Rabbeinu Tam. And now, he says here in Sefer Yashar, Rabbeinu Tam says, I have to say this because of the stira between the two different Gemarot. And he actually brings a beautiful diuk. This is, Tosafot is being very meduyak on the words that the Gemara uses. The Gemara uses a lashon in general, you call it mishkiyata hama. Mishkiyata hama means when the sun just went past the horizon and it's still daytime, according to Rabbeinu Tam. However, the Gemara in Psachim, Mechila, the Gemara in Shabbat, the first Gemara, it didn't say mishikiyat, it said mishitishka. Mishitishka, which means mashma implies shenichnas kavar ve'adayin lo higia le'achorei kippah mikol bechol, right? Which means mishtaka means it's already in the middle of the firmament. It's not just mehishtakash when it's just at the beginning. It's rather mishitishka. It's in the middle of the firmament, and therefore you're already way past that beginning horizon, and you're in the middle of it. And therefore, the Gemara in Shabbat uses mishitishka, so we must be talking about the end of the Shekiyah. And now he brings proofs, right? And we're going to deal with these proofs. Number one, he brings from Ner Hanukkah. Ner Hanukkah, right? The Gemara uses the Lashon, mitzvata meshitishka, ahama, ashetichle regal minashuk, right? You can light the candles. When you start lighting the candles, from meshitishka, according to Rabbeinu Tam, that's, much longer. It's not sunset. It's right before, it's right at the time of the last 3/4 meal of the end, the sun's journey of the Rekiah, right? And that's from the time when there's no more people in the shuk anymore, which means the Reglei Talmudae, which the Gemara explains that or Rashi explains that these were people that would sell wood at the end, and they would be very late at night. So therefore, Dehu Lailahu, right? According to Rabbeinu Tam, Meshitishka Hama is nighttime. We're going to see, beautiful, right? He says, when the Gemara just brings Meshitishka Hama, that means nighttime. So Ner Hanukkah, Meshitishka Hama, nighttime. However, our Gemara in Shabbat, the first thing we learn, it says Meshitishka Hama Shipinei Mizrach Ma'adimim. It added these words that are underlined here, and therefore that's mashma that it's nighttime. Only Meshitishka Hama is Laila, but when you have the word Shipinei Mizrach Ma'adimim, therefore that means it's not all the way night yet. It's that 3/4 meal end journey of the sun. So he's making different diukim. He brings another Gemara in Zvachim about when the blood or the korban can be pagul, when you have a bad intention for it. If you have kavanah, mishitishka hama, right? The Gemara also uses the Mishnah, the Gemara uses the Lashon, mishitishka hama. Mishitishka, again, remember, whenever Tosafot says mishitishka, or the Gemara says mishitishka, that means nighttime. And he brings that must be talking about nighttime. Another proof he brings is the Rashba brings a proof to defend Rabbeinu Tam, like we said in the advertisement for the class, is that it's the Geonim versus Rishonim. Why? Because most Rishonim, the Rashba, the Ramban, we're going to see everybody held like Rabbeinu Tam. The Rashba also brings another proof. Remember that Gemara that Rabbi, he said that you guys, my servant, or Bnei Mehuzah, according to Rabbeinu Hananel, that you don't know, you're not experts in the time of the sun, check when the sun is by the palm trees, by the head of the palm trees, and that's enough time. That's when you stop doing melacha. So says the Rashba, what's the proof for Tosafot? He says, "De alma leman dekim lehu b'shiura derbanan." If you know the measurements of the rabbis, the timing of the rabbis, afal gav deleka shimsha afilu beresh tikla. Even if there's no more sun anymore, which means it's not on the resh tikla, it's not there. Rather, it completely went down the horizon. We're going to say you're allowed to light, and because it's still daytime. So Rashba is saying that the sun went down. If you know the timing, you're still able to light. Because why would Rava give a timing so close down there? It's really hard to understand this, but simply Rashba is trying to bring a proof for Rabbeinu Tam that only you guys that don't know the times. But if we know the times, therefore we're allowed to go even lower, which means when the sun already passes the horizon. So now we're going to get into the questions of this Tosafot. So, but before that, just a little sikum I wrote here. According to Tosafot, Shekiyata Hama, these are very important words. Shekiyata Hama, that is the beginning of Shekiyah, which is still daytime. Whenever you have the word Shekiyata Hama, Rabbeinu Tam says daytime, no problem, which means it's twilight. Twilight, according to the Rambam, the Rabbeinu Tam, the first part of twilight, still daytime, 100%. Meshitishka hama, whenever it says meshitishka, which means already really into the rakia, that means it's setukochavim, it's nighttime, like we said for Hanukkah. However, meshitishka hama kol zman shepenim mizrach ma'adimim, like they were in Shabbat, that means it's towards the end of Shkia, right before the 3/4 mil, the last journey of the 3/4 of a mil of the sun, and that's ben hashemashot. So mitishka hama kol zman shepenim mizrach ma'adimim, that's ben hashemashot. So those are the three different outcomes of Rabbeinu Tam, of how he interprets the word shikia, mishtishka, or mishtika hama kol zman shepenim mizrach ma'adimim. Okay, so now's the questions of Kushiyot. First of all, it's very simple. Remember, he brought the proof from Zebachim about when you do the shechita and you have the wrong intention for after nighttime. The problem is that right before that, the Gemara uses a lashon dam nifsal b'shikiyata hama. Right? Remember, Rabbeinu Tam says meshitishka means nighttime, and he said it's vachim meshitishka. But here he's saying the Gemara itself uses the lashon b'shikiyata hama. Shikia, and according to Rabbeinu Tam, Shikia means daytime still. So it doesn't make sense. And also, the Gemara also brings down, Amar Rabbi Yitzhak bar Abdumi, Minayin ledam shenimsa b'shkiyat hama, shenemar da da da. So also, b'shkiyat, shikiyat. According to Rabbeinu Tam, it said meshitishka, not shikiyat. So the Tosafot on the spot, they answer, but now they already built a certain pilpul off of the different stira, the contradiction between Gemara and Shabbat and Psachim. And now they came out with the different words of what they mean, and now you have to deal with these things again. So they deal with it, but they have to build another type of lumdis, as they say, on these contradictions. So now Rab David Shelush, I love Rab David Shelush. So Rab David Shelush, he actually has a whole beautiful. He talks about it in all of his farim that he wrote on Hemda Genuza, on each chelik, and on the second one he deals with it very well about Ben Hashemashot. Actually, at the end of this PDF. I brought in how he starts off this whole question of should we be machmir on it or not. And here he brings down the proofs. He destroys left and right the proofs of the Tosafot, which again, he has big muscles to do that. So he writes, first of all, the proof from Ner Hanukkah. Remember, Tosafot said Ner Hanukkah. He actually in Menachot he explains there is that of course it has to be nighttime, because if it's daytime, you don't really have any benefit from the Ner Hanukkah, or you don't see it because you don't have a candle during the daytime. What benefit does it? What benefit is it? So he explains, Rab David Shelush, what are you talking about? No, the simple pshada mishtishka is regular sunset, and at that moment, at Shikiyah, when you're lighting candles, you can actually notice it because the sun is not in its full strength. Only when the sun's in its full strength, that's a problem. But when the sun is already at sunset, you can notice it. Actually, sorry, Rav Kafir, he explains as well that according to the Ramban, you actually in the Gaon de Vilna as well, you light the Hanukkah candles at Shkia, and he explains is that it's actually nikar for the mitzvah. Hachamim dafka wanted you to light during Shkia because if you're lighting it during the daytime, you don't see the candles. If you're lighting it at nighttime, then people are going to think it's just regular candles for your house because it's dark. So at Shkia, when it's in between times, that's the best time to light, according to Harambam. So therefore, David Shelush says that's not a proof. And then he brings the whole proof that the Rashba brought regarding the Resh Dikle, that Rabbi told them to look at the top of the palm trees. He's saying, he says it doesn't make sense. If the time that they're giving, Rabbi told them, is when the sun is at the top of the palm trees, why only there? Why limit them to there? According to Rabbeinu Tam, you still have another hour, 1 hour until Seta Kohabim or Ben Hashemashot. From that time all the way till the Ben Hashemashot, the last 3/4 of the meal of Rabbeinu Tam, you have an hour. So why would the Hachamim be so machmir on the people, the servants, or the B'mei Mechuzah? They don't know the shiurim, the rabbis, for 1 hour. Yeah, give them. So therefore, he says it doesn't make sense, that proof of the Rashba either. So now, going back to science. So the Lechem Mishnah, I think so far what I saw was the first opinion to actually show that the Rabbeinu Tam was based off of the incorrect science, right? He says that the Rava Magid who brought Rabbeinu Tam on the Rambam, these are all pirushim. The Lechem Mishnah was from Salonika. He gave one of the most beautiful pirushim on the Rambam. he writes that the Maggid Mishnah who brought the Rabbeinu Tam, he says, no, that's Rabbeinu Tam, Sover Kisvarat Chachmei Yisrael Shegalgal Kavu Umazal Chozer. They're going with Rabbeinu Tam Shita is with the incorrect science of the Hachamim, the Jewish Hachamim, before they reverted to or they retracted and went with the Chachmei Goyim. Right? Because he said, look, Aval Kasha in the bold, Aval Kasha, Shari Kavar Amru Begamara, the Gemara Pesachim says, Shebedavar Ze Nitzchu Hachmei Yavan Hachmei Yisrael. Right? He explicitly says the Lashon was Hachmei Yavan. The Greek scholars, they defeated the Jewish scholars. Right? We're going to see that's the in the more Nebuchim, in the next actually you skipped to that. The Hu Amra Beferush, the more Nebuchim, he brings down this girsa. V'nitzchu Hachmei Umot Ha'olam Hachmei Yisrael. Right? The girsa we have in our Vilna edition is that V'nir'en Divrehem. Their words seem more likely to ours. Right? But the girsa that the Rambam and all the old Andalusian texts had is actually no, v'nitzhu, they won, they defeated. It's a much stronger lashon wording of defeat, that they beat us. So therefore, he's saying that's completely a wrong svara, and therefore, so going back to the Lechem Mishnah, he asked, "V'imken ech kavas svara hazot?" How can you hold? How did Rabbeinu Tam be posek like this? After the opinion of the Chachmei Yisrael were already pushed off. They lost, right? So what do they do with this? So we're going to see soon. So already you see the Rambam, he held like that as well. He brings down Nebuchim that the Jewish Hachamim were wrong, and it's not a problem to believe the Goyim and these type of things because these are things based off proof, and we didn't have a tradition for it. It was just based off, we didn't get these type of sciences on Har Sinai, although many rabbis nowadays will tell you that they did get it on Har Sinai. However, according to Rambam, Nebuchim, they didn't have this tradition from Har Sinai. So therefore, we're just talking about with empirical evidence, no problem. Fine. So the Shita Mikubetzet. Who was the Shita Mikubetzet? He was of Betzalel Ashkenazi, living in Egypt. The Arizal went to go study by him. He was a Talmid of the Radbaz. It's important to remember the Radbaz because we're going to see there's a big machlok between the Radbaz and the Maharam al-Ashkar. Two big Hachamim. They both came from Gerush Sfarad when the Inquisition came, got kicked out of Spain. They ended up in Egypt, going to different places, but they ended up in Egypt. And they had a big machloket on this question. Do we go like Rabbeinu Tam or not? The Radbaz, he went with Rabbeinu Tam, and the Maharam al-Ashkar, he did not go with Rabbeinu Tam. And the Shita Mikubetzet was a Talmid of the Radbaz. He actually took over his position in the Beit Din when the Radbaz made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. So the Shita Mikubetzet, look what he says here. He says, Shemati Mishmosh Rabbeinu Tam. Right? I don't know if anybody else wrote this before, but he's saying, I heard in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, Shahaya Omer Ken al Hade Amrinan. That what we said in the Gemara Pesachim, that the Jewish Hachamim admitted to the Goyim. Look what he says. The Afal Gav de Nitzu Hachamim Wota Olam Lechokmei Yisrael Hainu Nitzchon B'Ta'anot. That the Jewish people admitted that they won, that was only because they had better proofs against us, which means they were better lawyers than us. Aval ha'emetu kehachmei Yisrael. But the truth, the real truth, the fact is that the Jewish scholars were right. And that's why it says the Shita or Rabbeinu Tam is that in the Tefillah, you open up the Sidur. On Shabbat, we talk about the sun going through the Rakia and the moon going through the Rakia, going through the firmament. And that's why we have it there. Right? And it's actually a good proof. We have to be bothered. Why is it that we have it here if the Gemara itself tells us, or the Tanaim, they said that they lost? How could it be? So therefore, he says that don't read the Gemara at face value. We lost because they had better proofs. They had better lawyers than us. But really, we were right. We have, the secrets, and we were right. So now, Rav David Shelush, going back to Rav David Shelush, he says, Hayom galui v'yadua lechol shachmei umot ha'olam sodkim. Nowadays, this is worse than a flat earth, believer. I mean, you do still have flat earth people, but he says nowadays it's impossible to deny that the Goyim, the Hachamim of the Goyim, defeated the Jewish people. You can't, this Shita Mikubetzet, or what he said in the name of Rabbeinu Tam, it's preposterous to believe in that. Vilu haya hashita mikubetzet beyamenu haya hozer bo midvarav. And if the Shita Mikubetzet, he lived in our days, of course he would retract from what he said. Right? And now, beautiful. This problem that we have in the Sidur, how do we say this every day? It says, Hakol yoducha poteah b'chol yom datot. So he gives two answers. Number one, it's teoria piutit. It's just a poetic theory. That's just, just like in Tehillim it says, right? This is Tehillim talking about the sun and giving it some physical form to it, or like human attributes to it. So too, it's just poetic theory. Don't take it literal, relax. However, the second shot, which is beautiful, I actually have this Rambam. He says, if you look, and he says, and this seems more plausible to Rav Shalush, he says, if you open up the Sidur of Rav Saadia Gaon and the Sidur of the Rambam, those words are not in the Sidur, right? And he says that he's suspicious. He says, perhaps some people who wanted to really give chizuk to the Shita Mikubetzet, they actually put it into our Sidurim, right? I don't know if the Spanish and Portuguese Sidur has it. That'd be interesting. But every Sidur that I know, Sephardi Sidur, modern day Sidur, actually has it. So so he says that some people did it in order to strengthen the Shita of the Shita Mikubetzet. And he actually brings down from Yehuda Barceloni that somebody who says that ta'ut ve'en lo ikar, right? This is one of the Rishonim, early Rishonim. He writes that it's a mistake to say this in your Sidur, right? And he brings down that Hachamim, only in 2 places did they say that you have to mention Shabbat. Only in Shabbat B'Tefillah, which is the Amidah, and the Birkat Hamazon. But if you're going to add it in other places, don't change anything around. And if you're doing that, you're you're changing the nature of the text that the Hachamim made. So therefore, you see that Rav Shalush is saying, it shouldn't be in our Sidurim, and it was added later. Fine. Now Rav Shalush, he says he's just astonished how people like Rabbi Akiva Eger or the Yarot Devash, these are all later opinions that they already knew about America, they already knew about how the sun works, and they still didn't retract, and they went with the pshat of Rabbeinu Tam, or they went with the pshat of the Shita Mikubetzet. So he's saying, how can you write things that that the mitzvot, the truth, is slapping you in the face? How can you write such lies? So he's astonished by these hachamim that they still went with the other pshat, right? And he says this is beautiful. This is what Rabbeinu Avram and Rambam is all about. And this is, you see 2 different school of thoughts. Some, they want to hide the fact that the Jewish hachamim were wrong, and therefore they say no, like the Shita Mikubetzet Shita. Whereas the Shita of like the Rav Shalush, and this is the Shita of the Rambam and the Shita of Rabbeinu Avram and Rambam, is you see the Gedulah, the greatness of the hachamim is that they were model la'emet. They were admitting to the truth when they were wrong. So just 2 different ways how to look at it. Is the glass half full or half empty? Fine. Maram al-Ashkar. So the Maram al-Ashkar, he had a question brought to him. Is a child that was born on Friday, right after twilight, right after the sun went down, but before the time of Rabbeinu Tam Shikiyah, right? Or the time of the Ben Hashem Ashot of Rabbeinu Tam. Do we do the Milah on that same time, which is according to Rabbeinu Tam Friday? Or do we do it on Shabbat? Or do we push off that until Sunday? So if you look at the notes on the bottom 4, I brought down Rav Mazuz. Actually, he shows that the Radbaz was asked the same exact question from the same Lashon in his Teshuvah. And he says that they were sitting in the same Beit Din, and probably the question came to them when they were sitting in their office. So he says, he brings in the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam, and he says, however, this is very important. First, you have to know is that they were sitting in Mitzrayim, and even now today, we have the Cairo Genizah. We have so many Genizot, so many Sfarim. There's thousands and thousands of books that we need to be worked on that we still find in the Cairo Genizah. So imagine these are 400 or 500 years ago sitting there in Mitzrayim, and they had access to a tremendous amount of response of the Geonim that nobody else had. So he writes, yes, Tosafot had a question, but they didn't know that people before them dealt with this. Who was that? You had Rav Shirira Gaon, Rav Haye Gaon. The Geonim dealt with this question, and they already pushed it off. He says, B'shtei Yadayim, they pushed it off, this question, because they say, no, that Gemara Pesachim was dealing with wrong science, and they didn't go with that. So therefore, he says, therefore, we don't go with the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam. Again, he asks, he doesn't understand Rabbeinu Tam, how do you go with this against the fact that the Gemara says that the Hamim admitted that they were wrong. But again, he didn't see probably what the Shita Mikubetzet brought down, because that came a little after him. Just to skip through, he also brings a proof from Nisim Gaon, another Gaon. This is beautiful. If you look at the underlined words, he says, right? What is the givul of Erev? They ask him, what is the time frame of nighttime? So he says, the second shetipor, right? That it falls, the sun falls from the horizon. That's already shikiyah. So we have proofs from the Geonim. I didn't mention it before, but we didn't read it before. But all the Geonim are saying shikiyah is what we think. Shikiyah is when the sun goes down past the horizon. The simple pshat of the Gemara in Shabbat. And now he brings from Rabbeinu Avram HaHasid. Rabbeinu Avram is the son of the Rambam, right? And he says, for sure, we know everything he says is midivrei aviv. It's from his father, right? He says clearly. I'm just going to read the underlines. He talks about Ben Hashemashot. He says, "Kol od shelo tishka kol agula bichlala v'tarov hashemesh tachat agula ofik harehu yom." Right? He says daytime is when the sun is still going past the horizon. It's still day until the entire agula, the entire sun, goes past the ofik, the horizon. So he's bringing. This is the Maharam al-Ashkar. He's bringing from the Sefer of the Rabbeinu Avram and Rambam. We don't actually nowadays, he wrote the Sefer Maspeak Lov de Hashem. In Arabic, it's called I forgot how to say it in Arabic. I'm sure Ohad knows it properly, but he has the Arabic the Arabic work in front of him, and we have only fragments of that available nowadays. And he had this in front of him, and of course we can believe Maharam al-Ashkar that he's reading Rabbeinu Avram and Rambam, and Rabbeinu Avram and Rambam is telling for sure what his father believes, and that Shikiyah is what we think like when the sun goes past the horizon. Right, and he says, everybody knows we have to follow the Rambam in this, and of course Rabbeinu Avram was talking about his father's Shita, right? We can't go left or right from the Rambam, especially Mitzrayim, because that's a place where the Rambam passed away, right? And let's see, let's go a little further. In the end, he's posek. We go we push it off to Yom Rishon. We push it off to Sunday because Ben Hashemashot is Safek day, Safek nighttime. We're not going to do it on Friday because it's past Friday. And we're not going to do it on Shabbat because it's Safek if it's Shabbat. And therefore we push it off to Sunday. And that's actually the Halakha that the Chidah brings down. Any posek nowadays will tell you that. Anyways, the question is, Halakha Lema'aseh, what does Shulchan Aruch posek like? So you open up the Shulchan Aruch in Orech Chaim, he brings down, he talks about Tosefet Shabbat, right? The whole machloket, is there a concept of Tosefet Shabbat? Is it, the Rambam holds it's only by Yom Kippur, but other Rishonim argue and say, no, it applies by Shabbat. So when is this Zman of Tosefet Shabbat? So he says, I'm going to read the bold, Bizman Tosefet Zeh, hu mitichilat ha-shikiyah, she'en ha-shemesh niret ala haaretz ad zman ben ha-shemashot. Ve'azman hazeh shu gimel minin reviyah. Right? He's going with Rabbeinu Tam. He's saying the time to add to Shabbat is from the beginning of Shkia, which means when the sun goes past the horizon, and you can't see the sun anymore on the land, ad zman ben ha-shemashot, until ben ha-shemashot. Right? So ben ha-shemashot, according to Maran, didn't start once the sun goes past the horizon, rather much longer, which means he says, v'zaman hazeh, it's 3 million and 1/4. So it's much longer. It's 58 minutes, according to, let's say, Rashi and Maran. Maran held it's around 58.5 minutes. That's the time, 58.5 minutes. So according to Maran, Shulchan Aruch, Kibbanu Horaot Maran, if you want to go with that shita, we accept the rulings of Maran. When the sun goes down, you have 58 minutes to drive in your car, to do whatever you want to do. And only then you have the 13.5 minutes where you have to be careful of Ben HaShemashot to be machmir. But if you want to do Kabbalah, you want to do Tosefet Shabbat, you want to add on to Shabbat, no problem. You could do it before. Fine. And he explains that, Kodem, he says, the time of Ben HaShemashot, which is 347 mil, right? Shehem Kodem alayla. That's before the nighttime. So once only Laila, the night, the word Laila in the world of Maran, the Shulchan Aruch, he holds it only begins at the end of Rabbeinu Tam, after the Ben HaShemashot of Rabbeinu Tam. And that's why if you look at it in Orech Chaim as well, Ve'achshav, regarding Tefillah Mincha, according to Maran, how long do you have until you can pray Mincha? Ve'achshav shenagu litpalet Tefillah Mincha ad halayla. We have until the nighttime, which means, what's the nighttime according to Maran? You have 58.5 plus 13.5. You have 72 minutes past Shikiyah to pray Mincha, according to the Shulchan Aruch. Mishneh Torah, simple pshat of the Mishneh Torah, the Rambam is explaining that, the second the shkia happens, the horizon goes down, the sun goes past the horizon, you have until 3 stars that are benonim, right? This is the teaching of Shmuel and Rabbi Yehuda. And once you see 3 kohavim benonim, that's Laila already. However, the problem gets like this in Perush Mishnayot, according to the girsa that most people have, probably if you go on Sefaria, this is the girsa, says Veda ki ahar biat hashemesh. Once the sun goes down, shkia, or not shkia yet, ad shire kohav min kohavim abenonim begadola nikra yom. Until you see a big star, it's still daytime. And even v'shire kohav echad ad shiru shnayim hu gam ken yom. And even if you see 1 star past the sun went down, and you see 1 star, it's still daytime. Only when you see 2 stars, that's ben hashemashot, and 3 stars is nighttime. So the Rambam in Perush Mishnayot, seemingly he just went different than what he said in the Mishnah Torah. The Mishnah Torah, he just said shkia. The second the sun goes down, that's already ben hashemashot. Here he's saying 1 star business, 2 star business. It depends on the stars. So Rav Mazuz in his Sefer Beit Ne'eman, right, which is an amazing sefer, probably one of the best teshuvot that he deals with on Ben Hashemashot. He goes and pretty much attacks Chacham Ovadia Yosef. Chacham Ovadia Yosef, first of all, you have to know that, of course, Kibanu Horat Maran, following Maran is very dear to the Rav Ovadia Yosef. So he pushes Ta'alis to be Mahmir according to the Shita of Maran Bet Yosef, which is Rabbeinu Tam. And he writes that that's a minhag in Eretz Yisrael. And not only that, he tries to bring proofs that even Harambam held like Rabbeinu Tam. All right, that's the biggest chidush. Right, so we're not going to have too much time for this, but Rav Mazuz, he brings down that, first of all, for sure, the Rambam held like his son, or pretty much his son held like his father. He writes down that Rabbeinu, even if, let's say, we find a stira in the girsa of the Perush Mishnayot, first of all, Perush Mishnayot was written when the Rambam was very young. And therefore, he's chozerbo many times. There's so many different editions of the Perush Mishnayot. If you open up Rav Kafech Perush Mishnayot, he brings down all the different mahudarot, the different additions and different changes that the Rambam would make. So therefore, it's very, we're not going to make a stira between his son and the father. And not only that, Rav Ovadia wanted to bring a proof. You see from the fact that the Rambam in Perush Mishnayot talks about that when the sun goes down, it's not shkia yet. It's still daytime. Therefore, he holds like Rabbeinu Tam. Rav Ovadia jumped the gun and he went like Rabbeinu Tam. He implanted Rabbeinu Tam into the Perush Mishnayot of the Rambam. So Rav Mazuz says, wait, why are you saying that? No, it's very simple. He's just going like Rabbi Yehuda, and Amar Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, that talks about 1 star, 2 star, 3 stars. That 1 star is still daytime, 2 stars is Ben Hashemashot, and 3 stars is nighttime. So why do you have to jump the gun and say it's Rabbeinu Tam? The Rambam went with Rabbeinu Tam. You can still fit in the girsa of that. And then I'm going to just concise it. He says, but then, first of all, the Rav Mazuz, he brings down that the Maharam al-Ashkar in the Arabic versions, they don't have that whole 1 star, 2 star, 3 star business of the Rambam in Perush Mishnayot, right? Remember, Perush HaMishnah, the Rambam was written in Arabic and only translated by different people into Hebrew. So that's not in there. And on top of it, I brought in here the Girsa Rav Kafech. Rav Kafech, he says, this is the Girsa. Pretty much, Rav Kafech in the Perush Mishnayot, you open up the blue one or the old editions or red ones, he brings down the Girsa of the proper Arabic translation into Hebrew of Rav Kafech, does not have what Rav Ovadia wrote in his Perush Mishnah. And Rav Kafech says, probably that it's Mahadura Kama and mistakes, that they had mistakes in it, etc. But Rav Mazuz actually explains it very beautifully, and there's no stira at all. Then, of course, there's the question that the Radbaz asks, and that many people ask in the Rambam, is that in Kiddush HaChodesh, the Rambam actually brings down that 1 star out is still daytime. If you look at it here, for example, right, the Beit Din, they have to sanctify the month. So he says, Ra'u Beit Din atzman besof yom tisha b'esrim. On the 29th day, the last day of the month, imadayin lo yatsa kochav lel shloshim. They did the star of the 30th day come out yet. So Beit Din omrim mikudash adayin yomhu. They can actually still sanctify the day. Why? Because no stars came out yet. However, on the 30th day, if they see, which is the nighttime, they already saw 2 kohavim came out and they saw the new moon. Sorry, I'm not explaining this properly enough, but they see the new moon. Back in the old days, they would see the new moon, and if they would see the new moon, and the Beit Din themselves sometimes would see the new moon, they were able to be mekadesh the day. So he says, once 2 stars came out, they're not able to do it anymore. It's already the 30th day, and they cannot make it a 29th day Rosh month. Rather, they have to make it a 30th, a Me'ubar. They have to expand it. So therefore, the Rambam here in Kiddush HaChodesh is saying that the whole Ben HaShemashot is based off of 2 stars, not 1 star. Pretty much like what he said in the old edition of the Pirush Mishnah that Rav Ovadia brought. So Rav Mazuz says there's no question at all, and he actually brings that this is what Rav Levi ben Habib, who was the Bar Plukta, he was the big rabbi that had a debate in Yerushalayim versus Mari Berav, who tried to institute smicha again, and he was also a master in astronomy and cosmology, and he clearly said that no, the Rambam in Kiddush HaChodesh, very simple. This is beautiful. He says in Kiddush HaChodesh, since this is with the Beit Din, they were experts in cosmology. They knew the stars how it worked, so they can be mekel, let's say quote unquote, lenient, and know when Ben HaShemashot really is, based off of 1 star, 2 star business. However, for most people, that it's hard for us to know the stars, see the stars. Therefore, the Rambam just wrote in Hilchot Shabbat, Mishkiyat Hama, once the sun goes down. So, but really, in essence, the truth, if you really had proper technology or you had the proper ability and skill to know when it's 1 star, 2 star, like the Beit Din, the Sanhedrin did, then that's really when Shikiyah starts. But however, we don't have it, so therefore we don't know it. So for general people, the Rambam wrote in Shabbat that it starts from the sunset. Fine. And then we'll just skip a little bit more because I know we're out of time. Just a few more minutes if you guys don't mind. Right. So there's many other proofs that it's very hard to understand that the Rav Ovadia, he wanted to also implant into the Mishnah Torah of Hilchot Shabbat. The Rambam said there is that perhaps the Rambam is talking about Sof Shkiyav Rabbeinu Tam. Right. So if we go all the way back up to what the Rambam writes here, Rav Ovadia actually wanted to say that he's talking about Rabbeinu Tam. We have to do a pilpul, and the Rambam's talking about the Sof Shkiya of Rabbeinu Tam. But again, Rav Mazuz is saying, how could you say such a thing? And I'm just adding in here, you open up the Hagdamah of the Rambam. He says that I'm writing this sefer for everybody to understand, women, children, anybody can understand it. I wrote it in Ivrit Kala, and now Hamuvadi is trying to implant that no, the Rambam meant here, we don't want to make a machloket between Rabbeinu Tam and the Rambam, and therefore it must be that the Rambam's talking about Sof Shkiyav Rabbeinu Tam. But again, would anybody ever know that if they never saw Rabbeinu Tam? No. So then Rav Ovadia, he has a problem. How could we say that that they're making a mistake, that the Hachamim made a mistake? How could they make a mistake in such a thing? Right? He brings down, this is Rav Ovadia's word in green. He says, right? These rabbis knew all the secrets, right? How can we go against them, that without them, we're going to be like a blind person in the dark? These are our rabbis. So he says, Rav Mazuz says, it's not a problem. First of all, they're using the logic of their time. And he brings down like 10 or 11 examples of how you see that, let's say the Tosafot and certain Chachmei Ashkenaz, they made mistakes, and just because they didn't understand the mitzvot of certain things, right? For example, he brings down, I'm just going to run through these things, is that Tamarim, the date, the Tosafot in a few places in Shas, they bring down that there was a hard klipa, there was a hard casing to them, right? And of course, we know that maybe when they're not edible, but there's no hard casing to dates. You pick a date that's ripe from the field, and you could eat it. There's no hard case. So Rav Mazuz, he says that, of course, the Bale Tosafot, Rashbam, they never saw a date, right? He brings down also that Tevin, the Bale Tosafot hold that Tevin is Tevin Sirurim Inan Ma'achal Gemalim, that they don't eat the hay or the wheat, the stacks of Seurim of barley. That's not good food for Gamalim. So he says, that's not true either. Everybody knows that Gamalim, camels can eat it. And obviously in Provence and France, they didn't have camels. So therefore, he made a mistake in the mitzvot. You have another proof he brings. He from get it. The dried figs, pressed figs, right? They held that they had some hard seeds in it, and he says, of course, we know that there is no hard seeds in the dates, in the figs, pressed figs, and therefore again he didn't have that. And then he proves again that zeitim. Why is it that Tosafot holds that one olive is half the size of an egg? This is the famous, you see the very Yeshivish people on Pesach stuffing themselves to eat a kazait of matzah because they want to do the shita of Tosafot of half of an egg, and even the eggs became somehow this big, like ostrich eggs. So he says also he brings proof they didn't have they didn't have olives in Germany or in Europe, in that place in Europe. Actually, interesting, if somebody showed me that even they have a cookbook from like ancient Germany and they don't have olive or olive oil in any ingredients. It's just another proof for that. The rimon, this is interesting, right? They didn't see a rimon. Rashi explains how the rimon is. He has to compare it to like an egg. And Ramazuz is saying, obviously, he didn't see a rimon, a pomegranate. He never saw that. He brings down interesting is that it's a famous story that when the Ashkenazim, they came to Eretz Yisrael to make Aliyah around 200 years ago, for the first time, they saw rimonim. They saw the pomegranates. And what they did is they thought that you throw out the seeds and you eat the klipa, you eat the outside of it. You don't eat the inside. And they were crying that it's so bitter, and they thought that maybe they just weren't on the level to enjoy the fruits of Eretz Yisrael. It reminds me of a friend. I had a very yeshivish friend. My parents, we brought him to have sushi, and they served edamame for the first time. And instead of eating the seeds inside the edamame, he was only eating the outside and throwing away the seeds. It's the same thing that happened when they first saw the rimonim, right? So therefore, there's a problem, is because Ramazuz is dealing with a problem, and this is what Maran Rav Ovadia, to his benefit, is saying, even if they didn't see the sunset in Eretz Yisrael, right? The main thing, I don't know if I said this, but we know nowadays, he brings many scientists and many Rabbanim, they bring it as well, is that in Yerushalayim, the Shkia is around 18 to 20 minutes until 3 stars come out, right? So there's no way of Rabbeinu Tam's time or concept is correct, besides the fact that it's based off the incorrect science. On the same time, the mitziut, the truth, you don't see it like that in Eretz Yisrael, right? So in France, it actually, Ramazuz does bring down that in France, in that area where they were, the Shkia is very long. It still doesn't make the time exactly of Rabbeinu Tam. He brings down it's like 10 minutes shorter if you're going to go with the exact time of Rabbeinu Tam. And then, of course, if you're going to go, again, remember, Rabbeinu Tam was going with that a meal is 18 minutes, which is 13 and a half for the Ben Hashemashot. But if you're going to go with a meal is 24 minutes, then, it could be like an hour and something until 3 stars come out. And Ramazuz is saying, no matter where you are in the world, already past 40, 50 minutes, you're going to have plenty of stars. Almost all the stars are going to be out. So Rabbeinu Tam, his theory doesn't really work anywhere, except maybe in close to where he is, but you're still only close, not exact. But how about when Maran Beit Yosef, where did he live in the last part of his life? He lived in Eretz Yisrael. So all these great Hachamim, they saw it. So first of all, you have the Rabbi Levi ibn Habib, who was a top astronomologist in his time, living in Yerushalayim. They rejected the Rabbeinu Tam. However, Maran Beit Yosef. So first, Ramazuz says perhaps most of what he wrote was not in Sfat. What he wrote was, when he was in different places. So therefore, he went with Rabbeinu Tam. Number 2, Ramazuz has an interesting theory, is that back then they didn't have watches. And they weren't so meticulous with timing things how we do it nowadays. So therefore, give or take, the minhag was always just to wait for 3 stars. And they didn't know precisely, how long it is, this or that. This is the time of Rabbeinu Tam, is it not? 3 stars was a siman. And therefore, that's how they kind of felt that the shita of Rabbeinu Tam was correct, which is hard. It's still hard to deal with. It's a hard reality. Simply, I think, how can Maran and other Achronim that they went with Rabbeinu Tam, Lefi Aniut Dati, my humble opinion is that, they just don't want to let go of the fact that, such great, and most of the Rishonim went with that opinion. However, Ramazuz is saying he wants to give a very logical explanation, saying that they just didn't have watches back then, so therefore it was much more difficult to calculate it. And there's actually in Or Torah, which is a journal that they would publish in different teshuvot from Kisei Rachamim and rabbis arguing with Ramazuz. They go on against Ramazuz full force, and there's plenty of teshuvot against Ramazuz talking about how They say, come on, of course they knew how to tell time back then. And Rabbi Mazuz fights back with them. Well, okay, it still needs to be thought out. But Rabbi Mazuz says, after we know all this, we know that we can't follow Rabbeinu Tam's shita because it's incorrect science. So therefore, can we use a suffix feka of Rabbeinu Tam? Right? I'm sure if you ask any Sephardi rabbi, most of them going like Hamovadia nowadays, let's say, praying mincha, or for the mohel comes late to the Bet Knesset after Shkia, or you have hefsek tahara for a lady. She has to do a hefsek tahara before she starts her clean Sheva Nikiim, 7 days. But what happens? It's already Pashkia. So can you make a suffix feka? Right? So Rabbi Mazuz is saying, listen, we cannot use this suffix feka business anymore. We can't make this double doubt business based off of Rabbeinu Tam, because it's an incorrect shita. And he brings down that was the minhag was never to go with to make a suffix feka and use Rabbeinu Tam for hefsek tahara, for other things as well. He only brings down by minha you could be mekel. He brings down from Geonim and others poskim that the minhag was to be mekel, that you can pray even after shikia. He says you can do up to 17 minutes. Rav Ovadia says you can do 13 and a half minutes. He goes with the Rambam. He says that Maran would have been chozerbo. He would have retracted if he knew that the Rambam held that a meal is 24 minutes and therefore 3/4 of the meal is 18 minutes. And therefore he holds that you can pray minha up to 18 minutes. Sorry guys, I keep on stretching this, but terutz, Rav David Shelush, he wants to make a simple explanation, a simple terutz for the stira, the contradiction between the Gemara in Shabbat and the Gemara in Psachim, right? So simply the Geonim we saw, Rav Shirera Gaon, Rav Haye Gaon, that the Mahram al-Ashkar he brought, they just reject the Gemara. They say, no, stira, who cares? Goodbye to the other Gemara. They had no problem with that. But nowadays we don't really learn Gemara like that. I mean, should we? Yes, maybe yeah. But this is not how people learn the Gemara nowadays. So Rav David Shelush, he came up with a beautiful chidush. He says it's very simple actually. And actually read it. It's beautiful. He's saying very simple. In Shabbat, we're dealing with the halachic day. For halakha, what's day and what's nighttime? The Gemara in Pesachim is dealing with just the actual what is considered day and night, but more regarding the Korban Pesach, which started at Netzach Hama, but not regarding general halachot. And therefore he says that Gemara there is talking about Shikia, when the sun goes past the horizon in Pesachim, all the way until all the stars go out, not just 3 stars. For regular night, the way you talk about, probably with Goyim as well, when do you say night? When the star is completely dark, filled with stars. That's when you say night. So Gemara in Pesachim is just talking about full night, full on night. But we're not talking about the halachic yom. Halachic yom, the halachic day is different than the way that Bnei Adam speak, that people speak. So that's a beautiful chiluk. And actually, after he writes this, he brings down that the Gaon de Vilna, the Gra, he also held like that as well. And I saw also Rav Mazuz and Bai Ne'eman, he comes up with the same hidush, and then after he finds out, the Gaon de Vilna also held like that. So all these great Rabbanim, they are coming in and showing that this is the halakha. Sorry, that's the answer for the stira between the Gemarot. If you don't want to go with the extreme shita of the Geonim that just kind of dismiss it very easy. Last thing, halakha question: should we follow Rabbeinu Tam lechumra? Right. So Rav Mazuz, believe it or not, Rav Mazuz, he goes through 50-60 pages in this about why we reject Rabbeinu Tam. Halakha lema'aseh, what does he say? We don't use it for suffix feka, but because Rav Ovadia Yosef, who was the Marad, he is the Marad Atar of Eretz Yisrael, he says to do it, we have to do it. Rav Ovadia Yosef in Yabiyom, he writes that for Egyptian communities, if you had the minhag that you don't do it, then you don't have to do it. But here in Eretz Yisrael, since it's the Atra de Maran, it's the place of Maran Bet Yosef, we have to be machmir. Rav David Shelush has a very different opinion. So seemingly it sounds like he's playing more politics. He doesn't want to, be so stick a hand out against Maran or Rav Ovadia Yosef. But he's saying we do it lechumra. You can be machmir. We should be machmir because Rav Ovadia Yosef said so. Even though, if you actually, I can show you if you guys ask later, all the different proofs from almost everywhere in the world outside of Israel or outside of Maran Bet Yosef, all the Sfaradim were keeping regular time with the Geonim. Even the Ben Ishai, sometimes they were doing a little bit different. You have to really even last night before I was coming home on the highway, and I stopped and I just wanted to watch, I had to pray mincha. I couldn't make it to shul on time, so I had to stop on the highway and pray. And I timed it. I have all the videos too. Just when is it really 18 minutes until 3 stars come out? And really in Miami, or at least let's say, is it going to be 18 minutes till the western side of the world is going to be completely red, or of Miami is going to be completely dark and not red anymore? And for me, it was around 40 minutes. It was around 40 to 42 minutes. It wasn't the 18 minutes of Rambam or what the Geonim say. So you have to say that in Eretz Yisrael, when the Gemara is talking about the simple pshat of the Gemara, if you're reading the Gemara, it sounds like this applies to anywhere you are in the world. The Gemara didn't say only in Eretz Yisrael, the Gemara in Shabbat. It didn't say only in Bavel. It talks about, it's saying very satum, that the time of Ben HaShamashot is 3/4 of a mil. Doesn't matter where you are in Antarctica, Canada, this, that, it's all the same. However, the mitzvot is not like that. I don't know, maybe I was just discussing this with a friend of mine before, is that, the Hachamim, they didn't go to these other places with such extreme or different sunsets that last much longer. I was in Edmonton in the summer, and there it's around 50 minutes for 60 minutes till you see sun. So they didn't go to these type of places, or they didn't go where the Tosfot were, so they didn't see it. So when they wrote it down, they were just referring to the location there in let's say in Eretz Yisrael, and Bavel had to be a very same. It's pretty similar. The same latitude and longitude is very similar of Bavel. So maybe that's a reason why. But in other places that they didn't see, okay, we have to actually use degrees, ma'alot, and that's what Rabbi Mazuz actually holds. You use the ma'alot, you use degrees. So there's a question: do you 8.5 degrees below the horizon, or when the sun is 18 degrees below the horizon? You have to do different calculations, and each person can actually calculate it for his own location. However, the question is, do you have to follow Rabbeinu Tam? So Rabbi Mazuz is saying you should do it to be machmir in Eretz Yisrael. Rav David Shalush, he actually, he starts off his whole teshuvah with this. The premise is that all our ancestors that were 10 times greater than us, and nobody in Eretz Yisrael was following Rabbeinu Tam. So who are we to be, in such a low generation, to have such, chutzpah, to be machmir and do Rabbeinu Tam? So he is posek in the end that if you want to do Rabbeinu Tam, it's nice to read his lashon here that I brought down, but he's in the end, he's saying that if you want to do Rabbeinu Tam, do it privately and don't tell anybody, because it's really yuhara. It's don't talk to people. Oh, I'm machmir Rabbeinu Tam. Now most people are, I'm machmir, I'm a Sadiq Rabbeinu Tam. He's saying don't tell anybody. If you want to do it, be quiet about it. Don't tell anybody. And that you really don't. Who are we to be machmir on this side if our forefathers didn't do it? Right in Morocco, I know Rav Shalom Mishashi. He brings down that they actually, him and another Rav, they went to the rooftop and they checked and they saw in 20 minutes it's actually Sete Kochavim. They had the same. They didn't follow Rabbeinu Tam. They saw the 20 minutes they were doing. Rav Shalom Mishash, Shemeshu Magen, he writes the minhag was 20 minutes. That was a minhag. There were maybe a few cities that they were machmir, a few hachamim, but the general minhag of everybody was to do it. Especially now that we know, Rav David Shalush says, how can you really try to answer up Rabbeinu Tam when he's using false science? There are, people try to answer it in different ways, but if you read it inside, he's using, we saw from the chart, the Rakia. He thought that the sun went through the Rakia. And we know now that there's no sun going through firmament, any firmament. Azago Baruch. Any question? Oh, no rush. Okay, now I see that. I was rushing. Sorry. Thank you, Sina.
Well, thank you so much. That was incredible. Such amazing sources. If anyone has any questions, they can unmute, raise their hand. You have Aharon, you have a question? Guess not. So if anyone has
no problem.
If anyone has any questions or comments, criticisms, the Rav is on our members Discord, so you can find him over there, and you can message him and ask questions on the platform. And with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you so much, Chacham, for that incredible shiur. Hopefully, we'll have you many more times this year. And Laila Tov, everyone. Chodesh Tov.
Take care. Chodesh Tov.